The new boss took over the company and immediately issued an announcement. No layoffs, no position changes, and a 20% salary increase for all employees. The news was thrilling. Early that morning, Xiao Xiao rushed over from the cubicles, almost tackling Tang Hu to express her gratitude. "You're a prophet, Foxy. You're my savior." Xiao Xiao, a veteran employee, had survived 3 company eras. To show loyalty, she never served 2 masters, believing that those loyal to former regimes rarely had a good end. However, Tang, who had already analyzed the situation with her, listing out all the details about staying or leaving, including insights on the new boss, Shaoli, his methods, and his character. In the end, her predictions turned out to be entirely accurate. Tang, who hadn't been feeling well lately, and with Xiao Xiao's sudden enthusiasm, she almost fell over, barely steadying herself after a few wobbly steps. Xiao Xiao lowered her voice and interrogated, "Come on, what's the deal between you and Shaoli? Old lovers? Ex-husband?" Clearly, she'd been reading too many romance novels. In reality, there was no complicated entanglement between them. There wasn't even an acquaintance. Shaoli had another subsidiary in the same building, and he'd occasionally inspect it. Tang, who had run into him a few times in the lobby or elevator. Once, she had picked up some scattered documents for him. One just happened to fall at her feet. He was in the middle of a temper tantrum, and the group of subordinates behind him dared not utter a word. Even the receptionists in the lobby were keeping their distance. But when Tang Hu handed him the papers, he still managed to say, "Thank you." The fact that he could keep his temper in check, not misdirect his anger, and remain polite even in such a situation left a good impression on Tang Hu. Maybe it also helped that he was easy on the eyes. His features were sharp and angular, like ink that had been softly brushed but still carried a hint of coldness and intensity. Probably a wise leader? Tang Hu took some medicine with her hot water, but Xiao Xiao still clung to her like an octopus, clearly determined to dig up some answers. After all, how many Cinderella and prince stories are there in the world? Maybe there are princes, but Cinderellas are becoming rare. On the other hand, white snow and blue snow types are popping up everywhere. She laughed and teased Xiao Xiao. "Didn't you always lament that the former boss was a 60-year-old man, destroying your chance to marry into wealth? Now that opportunity has arrived. The new boss is young and single. Go for it." Xiao Xiao elegantly lifted her fingers to tuck her hair behind her ear and said, "That's exactly my plan. Old ministers from the previous dynasty serving the new ruler sounds like a good recipe for love and drama, doesn't it?" Tang, who couldn't help but agree. Even after knowing Xiao Xiao for so many years, today she was almost dazzled by Xiao Xiao's well-crafted appearance. Clearly, she had put a lot of effort into this. Xiao Xiao had even called Tang Hu at 5 in the morning with the spirit of sharing good fortune with friends, urging her to get up and put on makeup. Unfortunately, Tang, who was in her period, and her weak immune system had already succumbed to a virus. She simply couldn't get out of bed. Tang Hu nodded repeatedly, definitely drama-worthy. As soon as they stepped out of the break room, they saw Shaoli and his entourage entering. Xiao Xiao, ever the charmer, swiftly handed Tang Hu her cup and rushed forward to greet him. The HR manager was busy introducing each person. When it was Tang Hu's turn, the manager barely mentioned her name before Xiao Xiao jumped in with a hearty laugh and said, "We all call her Foxy." Tang Hu felt an inexplicable sense of foreboding and glanced up. Just then, Shaoli looked her way as well. His gaze seemed to have the power to pierce through her, and he lightly remarked, "Fox, a cunning animal, isn't it?" She sniffed through her blocked nose, her head foggy from the medicine, feeling even more drowsy. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting a patchwork of light and shadow across Shaoli's face and body. The flickering spots of light made Tang Hu feel dizzy. And then she fainted. With a crash, the cup from Starbucks that she had stolen shattered on the ground. How heartbreaking. But this wasn't part of the plan. Who gave Shaoli such a hint? Perhaps growing up in a wealthy family made him inclined to make such assumptions. She could vaguely hear Xiao Xiao chattering on her behalf. Foxy didn't mean to. She didn't intend to disrespect you. She even mentioned this morning how fair, upright, and professional you are. Why did it feel like Xiao Xiao was only making things worse? In any case, Tang Hu woke up in Xiao Li's office, covered by a thin blanket that carried a faint smell of tobacco. He was reviewing some documents, and when he heard her stir, he raised his eyes casually, his voice indifferent. As you wished. As you wished. She had wanted to catch the new boss's attention, wanted to leave a lasting impression, and she succeeded completely. Tang Hu frowned slightly. Xiao Li smirked, the kind of smile that said, "Nothing escapes my eyes," which only made her feel more irritated. She sat up and bent down to put on her shoes. Xiao Li walked over, standing beside the sofa, scrutinizing her. Standing, she barely reached his chin, a clear disadvantage in height, which only added to her sense of defeat. But she took a deep breath and said, "This was all a misunderstanding." Obviously, her words didn't have enough weight to bridge the gap between them. Tang Hu doubted he even heard her, but he said, "I really don't like scheming women like you. However, I am fair. Since you helped me once, I won't treat you unfairly." He gave Tang Hu 2 days of sick leave. She had plenty of time to ponder when she had ever helped this fallen prince. Was it that rainy night when she offered him an umbrella as a rebellious teen who had run away from home? Or perhaps the time she saved a trembling Xiao Li from a kidnapping in a dark alley? No, none of that happened. She hadn't had the chance to act out such romantic scenarios. While Tang Hu couldn't recall when she might have helped Xiao Li, he had already made it abundantly clear that he didn't like her. She found herself demoted, albeit subtly. Now, she had to visit construction sites every day, looking disheveled with no trace of her previous image. Ironically, her work performance improved under the pressure. Xiao Li seemed somewhat impressed, even mentioning her in the employee meeting, praising her briefly before abruptly shifting gears. "I heard you sing quite well. Since the mood is good today, why don't you sing something for everyone?"
Who told him that?
Tang, who was tone deaf, without a single artistic bone in her body. She glanced at Xiao Li. He was sitting in the main seat, sporting a gleeful expression that screamed, "I'm doing this just to mess with you." Tang, who consoled herself. At least he wasn't asking her to dance. She obediently sang a children's song, though even with such simple tunes, she still sang off-key. Xiao Li led the laughter, exaggerated and full-bodied, with his eyebrows and eyes scrunched up in a way that made him look his worst. After the meeting ended, Xiao Xiao, with a straight face, said, "The boss looked great when he laughed. Did you notice that little dimple on his left cheek? And maybe even a cute little canine tooth. More like a nasolabial fold." As soon as she finished bad-mouthing him, Xiao Li's voice came from behind. "Tang Hu, stay behind." It wasn't about work. He simply said her singing was awful and suggested she practice at a karaoke bar. She thought it was a sarcastic jab, but to her surprise, he picked up his car keys and said, "Let's go." Those 2 words were enough to shock Tang Hu. In a panic, she dragged Xiao Xiao along. Xiao Li rolled up his sleeves and drove. Xiao Xiao, ever the chatterbox, asked him all sorts of questions, and he graciously answered them, making for a surprisingly harmonious atmosphere. Most of the singing was done by Xiao Xiao. Tang, who spent the time listening to songs and watching music videos while Xiao Li sat in the corner, legs crossed, occasionally glancing her way. In such an atmosphere, with those glances, Tang, who couldn't help but wonder if there was some old, she had a thing with him but lost her memory scenario playing out, or perhaps he secretly had a crush on her for ages and bought the company just to be near her. By the time they wrapped up, it was already early morning. Xiao Li first dropped Xiao Xiao off at her building before driving Tang Hu home. She had a little bit to drink, resting her head drowsily, as if she were falling asleep. In truth, she was pretending. She didn't want to talk to Xiao Li. Her boss already had a poor opinion of her, so she was determined to stick to the principle of the less said, the fewer mistakes. "What do you think I hate the most?" Xiao Li, with nothing better to do, seemed to want to chat. glancing at her as if he knew she was pretending to sleep. Tang, who had no choice but to gather her wits and sit up, secretly wondering if he would say, "Try again," if she answered incorrectly. Thinking like that, Tang, who couldn't help but smile slightly. At that moment, Xiaoli stopped the car and turned toward her slightly. Tang, whose heart tightened. From the moment he hit the brakes, she sensed something was off. Wasn't this a setup? Wasn't this a trap? "I hate the most." Was he not going to let her finish? With every word he said, he moved closer, his breath almost brushing her face. The confined space made her blush, and he slowly said, "Scheming, especially under my nose in my company."
Ah.
The boss seemed to be implying something. So, this was a trap after all. Xiaoli had written 2 evaluations, one to fire employee A and one to promote employee B. But when they reached the HR manager, the evaluations got switched. The security camera showed that Tang, who had looked at the evaluations, so suspicion fell on her. Tang, who had indeed checked the evaluations, but she had only looked at her own. The new boss had described Tang, who as cunning, calculating, and opportunistic. When had she given Xiaoli such an impression? Or had these words become compliments in modern times? Realizing she had been labeled this way, Tang, who became even more cautious, whispering, "I don't have the ability to scheme." Xiaoli sneered and warned her, "Don't be modest. There are eyes everywhere in this company, so don't try to pull any tricks." Then he suddenly leaned even closer, his voice dropping lower. "I know what you want. Now go think about what I want." Do all bosses like to say these cryptic things? She really hated the way he acted, like he had everything under control. Why had she ever given him such high praise? Ridiculous. But Xiaoli's behavior only confused her more. He should dislike her, right? He had openly expressed his distaste for her. Yet after that night, when rumors spread in the company that she had manipulated personnel changes, he squashed them, gradually calming the gossip, even if it meant facing speculation about his own motives. Xiao joked, "Could he be interested in you?" As the main character in this drama, she didn't feel enlightened by the question. Xiaoli wouldn't do anything that didn't benefit him. He was a businessman. His deep voice often echoed in her ears. "I know what you want. Go think about what I want." The differences in treatment gradually became more obvious. It was the classic situation of getting slapped in the face in public, only to be secretly handed a candy afterward. In the office, the central air conditioning, which had aged over time, hummed constantly. In this scorching heat, it only made everyone more irritable. Tang, who held a small paper fan, waving it slowly to cool herself down. Xiao, lying on her desk, was crying like a pear blossom bathed in rain. No matter how others tried to comfort her, she couldn't stop. Tang, who said, "Your makeup is smudged," that managed to stop her sobbing. It wasn't really a big deal, just that Xiaoli had scolded her harshly, hurting her pride as a young woman. Xiaoli was a man who rewarded and punished fairly. If he caught you making a mistake, he would scold you so harshly you'd wish you could die. Xiao had made a mistake on a report, filling in the wrong data, and her careless attitude afterward earned her the full brunt of his wrath. She couldn't get over it and complained non-stop, bringing down the whole team's morale. Tang, who looked up at the ceiling for a few seconds and said, "The fact that he scolded you means you're safe. You should start worrying when he stops scolding you." To her, this seemed obvious, but no one else seemed to notice. She had observed many times that Xiaoli was a bit like the Kangxi Emperor's 8th son, the typical schemer who is willing to scold someone. It was actually a relief when he did. The scariest thing was when he couldn't even be bothered to scold you. By that point, you wouldn't even know how you were destroyed. Who would have thought that right after comforting Xiao, trouble would land on her own head? She was really in deep this time. On a project she was handling with a multi-million investment, the most important document was lost. During a meeting with a client, she fumbled through her bag for a long time but couldn't find it. Utterly humiliating. Xiaoli sat in a seat, his face growing darker by the second. But he didn't scold her. He was clearly furious, but not only had they lost a lot of money, their reputation was in tatters. Driving afterward, he was gripping the steering wheel so tightly it looked like he might crush it, his muscles twitching with rage. Tang, who didn't dare say a word, afraid they'd crash and die. The next day, she received the order to be exiled to the company's most remote branch. Tang, who felt a bit smug. See? I was right. He didn't scold me because something worse was coming. Although, in retrospect, there wasn't much to be smug about. Xiao Xiao threw her a farewell party, and the two of them drank a little too much. On their way down the steps, someone tripped over someone else, and Tang, who rolled down the stairs. There were at least 20 steps, at a slope of around 45 degrees. Perfect for a dramatic movie scene, but not so great for rolling down. Tang, who injured her leg and ended up in the hospital with a cast. Shaoli came to visit her, and while she didn't expect flowers or fruit, she wasn't prepared for what he actually brought. He coldly tossed a plane ticket at her. You think playing the pity card will work? Even if you're on crutches, you still have to go. Oh, so her scheming, manipulative self was apparently using a pity tactic. She felt too tired to even bother explaining. She struggled to get out of bed, hopping awkwardly on one foot toward the door. Shaoli watched her with his arms crossed. Where do you think you're going? To the bathroom. There's no bathroom in the room? There is, but I can't go when you're here. As an employee, was she being a little too audacious? Well, it didn't matter anymore. At this point, the only thing that could cheer her up was Xiao Li's incredibly sour expression. She remembered a lesson from elementary school. When someone has preconceived notions about you, everything you do will seem wrong to them. Sitting on the toilet, she still had the plane ticket Xiao Li had thrown at her. The destination was a remote Palm Island in the South Pacific. She wasn't sure how many flights she'd have to take to get to this electricity-less, isolated island. Now, Tang, who really wanted to cry. She loved sunshine and beaches, but she also loved the hustle and bustle of the big city. How many chances do people get to see others' true colors? Tang, who leaned against the wall, inching toward the hospital room door. It was slightly ajar, and Xiao Xiao sat in a chair peeling an apple, the thin skin curling off in circles, perfectly showcasing her qualities as a good wife and mother. She said, Fox usually has a great tolerance for alcohol and rarely gets drunk. I don't know what happened last night. After a few drinks, I started stumbling. When did she ever have a great tolerance for alcohol? Last night. Who tripped over whose foot, really? Tang, who suddenly understood. While Xiao Li's preconceived notions were one reason, others must have fanned the flames. She smiled to herself, thankful for the bathroom. Just as she planned to sneak back, Xiao Li raised his eyes and caught sight of her through the door crack. For a brief second, she felt flustered, but quickly regained her composure, lifting her chin defiantly as a battle of glances ensued. I was right, a three-legged cat's pity tactic. Your wisdom is unmatched, but you can't escape my keen eyes. Don't think I can't see your sarcasm. I admit I chose my friends poorly. Birds of a feather flock together. In the end, Tang, who boarded the plane with a crutch. She was only mildly airsick, but after twisting and turning, her biological clock was completely thrown off, and she vomited upon arrival. Looking like this, she couldn't go anywhere else, spending her days cooped up in the hotel while the resort manager brought her a pile of documents to review. Who would think of building a resort on such a remote island? But Xiao Li wasn't ordinary. He had an exceptional business acumen. He earned money that ordinary people couldn't even dream of. There were tycoons in business, entertainment, and politics who would splurge to reconnect with nature. Even under a sunshade, the tropical sun was so bright that Tang, who could barely open her eyes. She closed the project plan and murmured, I actually admire Xiao Li a bit. Say that again. Startled, Tang, who almost jumped from the sudden chill, the culprit reclining lazily on a beach chair, his sunglasses covering most of his face, exuding a bit of a celebrity vibe. He glanced at her without any intention of taking responsibility for his sudden appearance. The excuse was to supervise her work, accompanied by a look of "caught you slacking off here." Tang, who had to use her leg as a shield. Although she wasn't at the construction site, she knew everything about it and relayed the details to him. He actually fell asleep while listening. Was he really here to supervise or just taking a vacation? Their interactions became somewhat harmonious. The island had no electricity or internet, and at night, entertainment consisted of singing and dancing. Sitting amidst the crowd, they listened to spontaneous songs in a language they couldn't understand but with melodies they could feel. Sometimes Shaoli was pulled into dancing, giving Tang Hu plenty of reason to mock his moves. The bright sunshine and blue sea seemed to awaken a sense of meaning in his life. He tucked away his sharp gaze and fierce demeanor, appearing a bit softer in beach shorts and flip-flops. This beautiful island made everything in Tang, whose eyes seemed beautiful too. One evening, after finishing a work report, they chatted casually for a bit. What started as harmless banter unexpectedly delved deeper. Shaoli began sharing his story, tales of internal strife within a business family, full of pretense and deception. The sunset cast a warm glow, highlighting the rarely seen sorrow in his profile. Then he turned to her and naturally asked, "What about you?" Tang, who was momentarily taken aback. She had no story to tell, no tragic background of divorced parents or unforgettable romances. Yet his gaze was filled with expectation, forcing her to muster the courage to recount a crush she had on a senior in high school. Shaoli shrugged. "Is that all?" Then he shook his head. "Tang Hu, you're not being honest." It was the first time he called her Fox, having always referred to her as Tang Hu. He hadn't put on a shirt after swimming, and his strong physique made her face flush as he leaned closer. Shaoli pushed his sunglasses up and asked, "Do you think I'm trying to get closer to you?" "If you mean those harsh treatments, looks like you still don't understand what I want." His eyes sparkled with the shrewdness of a hunter, imprinting her image deeply in his mind. "Tang Hu, I'm very interested in you." Oh, this was veering off the typical romance narrative. It wasn't "I like you," but rather, "I'm interested in you." Thus began to unravel a misunderstanding that had lasted a year. The first time he saw Tang Hu, she was in a dark red cheongsam, crouched in a corner of the hallway. With a pair of large black scissors, she was snipping a stack of paper into pieces. Sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating half her body as she muttered to herself, her eyes filled with resentment, resembling a mysterious sorceress. This image lingered in his mind, leading to a growing curiosity about her during their encounters in the office. At that time, he was planning to acquire the company she worked for, and once she picked up documents he had angrily thrown down. They clearly outlined the acquisition plan. He expected a complication. To his surprise, she didn't report it, which actually helped him significantly. He found her intriguing, sensing a deeper ambition. Sure enough, during their first formal meeting, she laid bare her ambitions. Undeniably, he didn't like scheming women, yet she piqued his interest. Behind her calm demeanor lay the desires of the city, and he noticed every nuance, feeling a sense of satisfaction. It seemed she had a hidden sadness. She would tear up at the sight of a beggar or go quiet upon hearing a special melody. Shaoli was intrigued, wanting to solve the mystery and see the changing expressions on her face. He often wondered if she had faced inhumane experiences or betrayal that shaped her enigmatic nature. He was somewhat captivated, feeling a tickling curiosity. Tang, who hadn't intended to laugh, especially since Shaoli had confessed his interest in such a dramatic manner. Whether it was a chase or something else, attracting a man's interest was always a point of pride. But she couldn't help it, bursting into laughter, then stopping at the sight of Shaoli's increasingly displeased expression. I've seen plenty of women get lost in romance novels, but I've never seen a man do the same. Guess what I was mumbling while I cut those papers into pieces? I said, "Grandma is so stingy. She can't even buy a shredder. It's only a matter of time before she goes bankrupt." I didn't report your acquisition plan because I had my own little schemes, but because I didn't even see the content on your documents. I just picked it up for you. Why would I sneak a peek at someone else's materials? You saw my tears and my contemplation, which every emotional girl possesses. You think I'm a mysterious woman with a story, and you're a little interested and want to get closer. At this point, Tang Hu stood up, looking down at Xiao Li from her height. In reality, I grew up without any hardships. My romantic life lacks highlights, my background is clean, and I have no story. I'm just an ordinary girl. So, Xiao Li, what are you going to do now? Xiao Li once tried to explain to his highly intelligent assistant from Harvard, there's a woman I thought was one type, so I was a bit interested. Later I discovered she's not that type. She's actually this type. Do you think I'm interested in her true essence or the facade she presents? After a 5-second silence, the assistant replied, Boss, do you know what you're talking about? Xiao Li felt a bit frustrated, accompanied by an indescribable sense of humiliation. He had followed her to a small island in the South Pacific, thinking everything would fall into place, only to find himself in a complicated situation. Perhaps he had been too harsh in the past. Her words had slipped out so freely. Who would have guessed that this fox was a vegetarian? He still cared about the misunderstanding that she wanted to get his attention, a rather self-indulgent thought. Every time he saw Tang Hu at the office, he couldn't help but feel guilty. Thus, he developed the habit of wearing sunglasses at work, which matched his naturally aloof demeanor, pushing people further away. The staff often discussed, did the boss get punched and end up with panda eyes? Maybe he overindulged and didn't sleep well? One day, as he walked past the break room, he spotted Tang Hu leaning against the counter, smiling knowingly, which was quite annoying. Xiao Li cleared his throat, and the employees in the break room immediately fell silent and dispersed. She, however, took her time, stirring her drink slowly with a small spoon. As he caught the faint fragrance of chrysanthemum, she suddenly smiled and said, Boss, chrysanthemum tea helps reduce heat. Would you like a cup? Was that a blatant provocation? Even worse, she lightly pushed his sunglasses up with a finger, saying, Oh, no dark circles. Hadn't anyone told her that this innocent look was particularly infuriating? He ground his teeth in frustration. Tang Hu, you'd better not have any dirt on me. She burst out laughing, feeling quite accomplished. That night, they attended a cocktail party, and Xiao Li brought along several executives, with Tang Hu among them. She didn't have an evening gown or any rhinestone accessories. So she wore a cheongsam that fit snugly, skipping the necklace entirely. It wasn't that she lacked a figure. She simply preferred loose clothing. Now, in this form-fitting attire, her curves drew quite a few lingering glances. Xiao Li suspected she was doing it on purpose, maintaining a stern expression all night, making the host believe he had offended him, scurrying around nervously. He was a natural when it came to suits, wearing them like a model, and the socialites flocked to him, while some shrewd ones tried to approach Tang Hu. She gently swirled her drink, answering the curious ladies, What kind of woman does our boss like? You, and you wouldn't do. He's not interested in the pure and kind. He's particularly interested in women who are a little bad, a bit cunning, preferably those who have experienced hardships or tumultuous love affairs. Her voice was just loud enough for Xiao Li to hear from a distance. Raising his glass toward her, he looked ready to settle the score. She deliberately spilled a bit of wine on herself, and when they got back in the car, he frowned. How much have you had to drink? You reek of alcohol. With blurry eyes, Tang Hu held up 5 fingers, then 8. 4 cups? No, wait, I think it was 7. He knew she couldn't handle her liquor. Last time on the island, she had barely managed 1 glass of wine before passing out for a whole day. Seeing him on the verge of letting it go, she secretly chuckled. But suddenly, her phone rang. There was an incident at the construction site. She immediately straightened up, speaking seriously. Boss, we need to go to the number 9 road site. Tang Hu, aren't you drunk? It was nighttime, and the construction site relied on hanging bulbs for lighting. She remained calmer than anyone else, moving through the chaos and directing with a steady voice, quickly regaining control of the situation. The workers cleared away the collapsed structure, and fortunately, there were no casualties. She didn't blame anyone, clearly delegating the tasks for the next day. The small 200-watt bulb shone next to her face, illuminating even the soft fuzz on her skin. Her lipstick had faded, yet that rosy hue looked more charming than ever. Once everything was handled, she collapsed in the car, almost ready to fall asleep. Xiaoli draped his suit jacket over her. It was summer, but the car's automatic air conditioning made it a bit chilly. Tang Hu, enjoying the coolness, exposed her arm and tilted her head to glance at him, mumbling, "Thanks." He firmly tucked her bare arm back under the jacket. Unable to resist, she complied and curled up inside. After they had driven for a while, he suddenly leaned closer. Being near enough, she could smell his scent even with her eyes closed. Xiaoli said, "I think I might be a little interested in this side of you too." She was too exhausted to respond and struggled to keep her eyes open as she said, "Don't take advantage of me. I'm really tired right now." Just as she finished, his lips pressed against hers. Tang Hu felt a coolness that was especially comforting, and she pushed against him lightly without much strength. The next morning, she woke up in her own home, her keys lying in the living room. She was fully clothed and began to doubt whether that kiss had been a dream. Arriving at the office, she realized she was already late. Xiao Xiao warned dramatically, "Be careful, the boss isn't in a good mood today." She still wore her usual carefree and romantic demeanor, but Tang Hu had become less familiar with her and merely smiled faintly before moving on. But Xiaoli indeed seemed to be in a foul mood, his dark sunglasses perched firmly on his nose. When she entered to deliver some documents, he sat like a statue in his executive chair. Just as she was about to leave, he spoke. Was it really that bad? Tang Hu didn't immediately grasp what he meant, but Xiao Xiao barged in suddenly. She blurted out, "Boss, the important documents that went missing last time have turned up in the hands of the planning director at Xingda Group. I heard he's secured the client that was supposed to be ours." After delivering this bombshell, Xiao Xiao noticed Tang, who for the first time, "Fox, you're here too. How did those documents end up in their hands?" Tang, who hadn't anticipated Xiao Xiao, had such a card up her sleeve. Why didn't she go audition for Empresses in the Palace? What a waste. Hearing Xiaoli stand up sharply, he asked, "Who's the planning director at Xingda Group?" Xiao Xiao cautiously glanced at Tang, who before replying in a sympathetic tone, "His last name is Liu, and it seems he's an alum of your school." Xiaoli's cold gaze swept over. "Tang Hu, stay. Xiao Xiao, you can leave for now." It wasn't quite the calm before a storm. She saw him approach without his sunglasses, thinking he would ask about the data leak, but instead, he leaned in with one arm braced against the wall, asking, "Is it really that bad?" What a persistent boss. Tang Hu suddenly realized what he was really asking. He actually trusted her. Was there anything warmer than this kind of mutual understanding? She smiled and replied, "It's not that I'm bad at it. I just felt so comfortable and cool that I fell asleep." Xiaoli raised an eyebrow. Shouldn't it feel passionate instead? She chuckled. Maybe next time. Why wait for a better day? Before she could object, his kiss descended. This kiss felt like a prelude to something more, and as Tang Hu hazily responded, she considered going along with it. He suddenly paused, asking, "Is the senior you had a crush on back in high school this Liu? Are we maybe going to bed later too?" "Tang Hu, don't change the subject. I'm very pure." In the end, pure Xiaoli became restless, lifting her shirt to touch her skin. Tang Hu, close to the door, easily grabbed the handle. She slipped away and shut the door in one smooth motion. With the sound of the door closing came Xiaoli's pained yelp. It must have been his front tooth hitting the door. Tang Hu set out to investigate the data leak. It was clear it was Xiao Zhao's doing. If it had been solely Xiaoli, she'd have thought he wasn't that charming. She planned to follow Xiao Xiao after work, but just as she reached the elevator, Xiaoli pulled her back, watching Xiao Xiao walk away. He said, "This isn't something for women to handle." She had forgotten. He was the big boss, and he had people who could dig deep. But seeing him inspecting his front teeth in the shiny floor-to-ceiling window made her feel uneasy. He turned his head with a sinister smile, and just then, the elevator arrived. He effortlessly pulled her inside. "Let's talk properly." She barely finished her sentence before it was swallowed back. His long arms were quite something. This kiss was intense. She was pressed against the cold elevator wall, her back feeling heated. His hand gripped her shoulder, the warmth of his palm seeping through the thin fabric, like volcanic lava pouring down, threatening to melt everything around. She heard him murmur, "I think I really am interested." Later, she learned that when he sent her to the island, he had already booked 2 tickets for them. Coincidentally, Xiao Xiao found out. Perhaps she harbored feelings for Xiao Li and concocted a scheme that led to Tang Hu injuring her leg. Xiao Li hired a detective. He could uncover not just commercial dirt, but also every detail of a woman's life history. Xiao Xiao turned out to be a loyal insider, acting on orders from the former boss to undermine the competition. Being close to Tang Hu, she knew where everything was and had never been guarded against her. When Xiao Li shared the investigation results with Tang Hu, she felt a bit let down. This is a bit lacking compared to empresses in the palace, isn't it? Isn't that more than enough to deal with you? This man clearly underestimated her intelligence. Tang Hu gave him a sidelong glance. Speaking of cunning and scheming women, "Oh, Xiao Xiao fits the bill perfectly, doesn't she?" The man immediately stood up. "I just remembered there's a project I need to discuss."